I'd like to introduce Matthew Zachary. We've known him for quite a number of years. He was a performer at our 2005 conference, I think it was, right, Matt?
Yeah.
Matt was a 21-year-old college senior and concert pianist en route to film school when he lost use of his left hand, was diagnosed with a pediatric brain tumor, a medulloblastoma, and told he'd likely never perform again. 15 years, 4 albums, a wife, twin children, and scores of concerts later, Matthew's struggle to get busy living has inspired countless thousands. Today, he is an award-winning recording artist and performer, an authority on youth culture, and a highly credentialed public speaker. A founding member of the Google Health Advisory Council, in 2007 he launched the I'm Too Young for This Cancer Foundation, which has since become the nation's largest support community for young adults affected by cancer. The foundation was ranked in Time Magazine Best 50 Websites and Fox News Top 10 Healthcare Blog, and supports a global following of hundreds of thousands of friends, fans, readers, listeners, and members. Matthew has helped to bring the cause of cancer under 40 to the national spotlight and has rallied a new crop of activists to give a much-needed voice to this forgotten population. Matthew has helped to measurably reverse 30 years of disparity and create social lasting change in how the public relates to cancer for the next generation. Please welcome Matthew. Thank you.
That was very impressive. That was very impressive. No, thank you. And it is quite amazing to be back here like 6 years later. I was in such a different place in my life 6 years ago, which is only actually maybe 10 years out of my diagnosis, and life was still then, 10 years later, in flux. So a humble thanks to you, Stan, for inviting me back, and to Al, who was my first cancer buddy ever. When I met him in Visa, I think the MIT listserv back in 1997, that's how it all really started. The brain tumor community was really there for me. They were the only community that was there for me, and which sort of leads me to why there's such a necessity to have a small, intimate session like this about why it's so different when you're younger. That it's not the same when you're 6, and it's not the same when you're 60, and that we're a sort of this book-ended demographic that deserves better. We need to be heard, and the medical establishment needs to understand why we need to be thought of as a different patient population entirely within the continuum of care, from diagnosis to end of life, whenever that is. So, I mean, I don't have to go into, I have a whole PowerPoint of my story, but it's not necessary because it was such a small group. I'll just basically give the highlights. Is that I was a concert pianist. I had started playing when I was 11 years old. I grew up here in New York City, in Brooklyn, New York. My mother was a pianist when she was young and stopped playing after she went to school. But my father bought her a piano for her 33rd or 4th birthday in the 80s, and I came home one day and there was a piano in the house, and I was like, all right, this is interesting. I just sat down and started playing, and my mother's like, you're getting lessons. Like, okay. So I got lessons, and 10 years later, I was the big fish in the small pond. I went to Binghamton University, upstate New York, and I had every aspiration to be a film composer. I wanted to go to Hollywood and write for television and write for movies. It was my passion. I wanted nothing more in life than to just pursue that dream. And during the summer of 1995, I was actually interning at the World Trade Center, which is an amazing experience unto itself. But I began to experience what we all know as peripheral neuropathy, but a version of that in my left hand, where I was having trouble like gripping and doing very fine motor coordination. Out of nowhere, it just started happening. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird. So I went back to college, not telling anybody any of this stuff, and immediately I knew that I couldn't play as well as I used to because I'm a pianist and you arpeggiate, you actually use your fingers all the time, and it was very difficult to sort of move my hand in the way it used to be, and I wound up compromising by switching my hands this way. And I'm also a lefty, so I had I couldn't grip a pen the right way, and I couldn't sign my name when I, used credit cards or whatever. And I also had a laptop at the time, and I had trouble typing with my left hand. So it was a very sort of a unilateral problem. So as a 21-year-old who's invincible, and there's nothing possibly wrong with me, I decided against my own better judgment to go to the campus physicians and tell them that something was weird. So I went the first time, and they told me that I had the flu, and it gave me Robitussin. True story. Didn't cure the problem. Then I went back, and they said I had MS. Then I went back, and they said I might have had a mini stroke. Then I went back, and they said I might have carpal tunnel. and I should use a backpack on this shoulder instead of this shoulder. And then I went back and they thought I had Epstein-Barr, the meningitis. So the numerous comedy of errors with the medical community on my campus kept delaying this potential diagnosis because no one really took me seriously as a 21-year-old who kind of knew his body. You know, he's a pianist, you're a musician, you're in tune with your aura, your psyche, whatever you want to call it. They just didn't believe me. They didn't really think there was anything necessary to be done other than it was just a stupid kid with complaining. He's stressed. College students are stressed. And it angered me that no one really took me seriously, and only was until like Thanksgiving break I went home. And that's when I started to experience like normal symptoms like dizziness, slurred speech, headaches, fainting, nausea. And those were the ding-ding-dings that the doctors finally said, wow, maybe there actually is something wrong with Matt. We should have taken him seriously 6 months ago. So I was diagnosed with something. They didn't know what it was until the surgery, but I was diagnosed on December 27th, 1995 after a routine MRI. Found this giant thing in my brain that didn't really seem to belong there. I'm not a radiologist, but you kind of know that this giant white thing shouldn't be there. So I had to call the school up and tell them that I don't know what's going on. I had to call my grad school up and say, well, what's the refund of the deposit we gave you? Doctors were like, well, let's just get this thing out of your head and see what it is. So January 10th, 96, I had an 8-hour craniotomy. They took the thing out of my head. They got good margin, they thought. It's located in your cerebellum. The medulloblastoma is a very unique tumor. It's the only one that's not really in your cerebrum per se. It's in your cerebellum. It's kind of a spinal cord-ish tumor. So they're going through the top, they're going through the back. So they go in through the back, they wrap around your spine, and they sort of suck this thing out, and they hope they don't do too much damage. But they kind of told my parents and not me that it's an incredibly risky surgery. This was 15 and a half years ago, don't forget. So a lot of the safety measures of the protocols of the technology that they have today for these types of surgery didn't exist. There was no laparoscopy. There was nothing of that matter. They had no like active MRI during the surgery. None of that stuff happened. So I had like a 80% chance of dying on the operating table because the procedure was just so invasive for my age, and that medulloblastoma is a pediatric tumor which is congenital. So you're born with it. I didn't do anything to cause this. There's no prevention, there's no early detection, there's no risk reduction, there's no anything. But the fact that I was 21 and not 6 threw everyone off for a loop. They didn't know what to do with me because once they had the pathology, the tumor's the tumor and the cell's the cell. There's no disputing what I had. And so I did survive the surgery, but they didn't tell me that I would have like no range of motion for 3 months in my neck. I had to learn how to swallow again and walk again and all these crazy, proprioception issues that you're not really supposed to deal with when you're 21. You want to live your life. And it was just devastating. But the one thing that did give me some hope, regardless of how long I'd live, because they gave me 50% chance to live for 6 months, so I could get home and play again. I got home, and after 8 months of not being able to use my hand the right way, I sat down and played for the first time in 8 months. It wasn't as good as it used to be because I hadn't used my hand the right way for 8 months, but I could get down and play. And I realized that whenever I would die, I would go down being able to play in some way, shape, or another and not let this thing sort of own me. So I had to call grad school, and I had to cancel because they didn't know if I'd be alive in July to go to grad school. And we rather use that money for insurance and medical issues and costs, which was devastating. I called the school up and said I'd like to graduate in May because I was supposed to graduate in December, but I had to skip some courses. And they said, whatever you want, bend over backwards for you, Matt, whatever you want. So I finished some courses in the spring from home. I had to go home and live with my parents, which sucks because you're 21, you want to live your life, and you go home with your parents again. I just spent 3.5 years not with my parents. I didn't want to go back to spend time with them. So I don't know, I graduated in May on time, but what was worse than the surgery was the post-operative. I don't know what that was. I'll fix that, don't worry. The post-operative stuff was horrible because back then there was no Temodar, there was no Gliadel, there were no chemotherapy agents that would do anything of benefit to me. Everything was more palliative, and the only options were really invasive surgery, which I had, and then like experimental radiation because they didn't really know how to treat a 21-year-old with a tumor in the cerebellum. So there were no like children's oncology group protocols that they could take off the shelf and say, here's what we do to Matt. So my story kind of ends as we get towards this conversation, which is they looked at my father, they looked at my mother. Of course, they're pediatric doctors that are not used to talking to patients, they're used to talking to kids. They're used to talking to the kids' parents, I mean. And they looked at my parents and they said, well, we don't know what to do with your son, but here's a list of things we think should happen. Of course, they met with the tumor board of like 9 different hospitals, and they said, well, he could either go home now, he'll be fine, or he could have like invasive transplants and aggressive random chemotherapy that may not make a difference, and we could take his whole brain out of his head and squeeze it around and stick it back in. We didn't know. So all the experts in the country telling me that they don't know what's best for me. So here's my options. And at 21, I had to make some incredibly ridiculous decisions as to what was in my own interest medically, clinically, and I guess, you know, for the sake of my quality of life. I ultimately opted for 33 treatments of extremely high-dose craniospinal radiation. It was, I think, 6,000 CG with a 3,000 CG boost. Very early on, clinical trial-ish stereotactic radiosurgery, which had 3-dimensional stuff that they now take for granted today, which is great. So you're welcome for being your guinea pig. So needless to say, I had numerous side effects. It was a horrible experience to go through. I have side effects to date, 15 years later, that sort of the latency, which leads to why I sort of represent my organization, why I started it. But I did graduate on time. I did survive 6 months, and they gave me 50% chance to live for 5 years instead of just 6 months, which was nice. But my story pretty much ends when I get back to Sloan after my 22nd birthday on May 27th, 1997, right? 1996, sorry. And I'm with my parents, and the doctors at Sloan Kettering say to me, well, you know, you look great. I had lost 110 pounds in 3 months. I had no saliva. I could barely walk. I was an emaciated shell of a human being. I don't look like that now, but I was really, really thin back then. And they didn't really seem to care. They just wanted to barrage me with whatever I thought was in my best interests. So I looked at them and I said, when am I going to die? And that's when they said, you have 50% chance to live for 5 years. And I said, well, that sucks. I don't want to live for 5 years. I want a 50% chance of living for 200 years. So who doesn't want that? Those are good odds. So then they said, well, we want to give you chemotherapy. Knowing that there was no WebMD, there was no PubMed, there was no anything back then to understand what that meant as a patient. I had the fortune of my father's best friend is a genetic research scientist at Rutgers. So my father ran all these things by him, and he's like, oh, you don't want that. That'll give him peripheral neuropathy. Didn't it just have peripheral neuropathy? Yes, they were going to give me vincristine, incredible large doses of vincristine. And the neuropathy from the tumor was gone, and I was slowly rehabilitating my motor skills and my muscle memory in my left hand for the first time in a year. And here they were wanting to barrage me with chemotherapy for a full year, which could take that away entirely. So I asked them, well, if you give me the chemotherapy, what are my odds go up to? Because I remember they said 50% chance for 5 years. They said, well, 55%. Let's do that math in our heads. 55%, that's an extra 3 months of life after 5 years, 55%. So quickly, I did the math in my head with my parents in the room, and I realized that I'd rather die in 5 years without vincristine compromising my ability to play again than live for 5 years and 3 months and die and have vincristine compromise my ability to possibly learn to play again and rehabilitate myself. So I really just flipped the bird and walked out. That's honestly the end of my cancer story. It's not the end of it's the end of my clinical path, but it's not the end of my survivorship path. And again, it took me an extraordinarily long time to reconcile where I was in my life. I had lost my career, I had lost many friends, I had lost most of my educational growth was gone. I was too sick to go to school, to do any occupational therapy. I wasn't offered any psychosocial support, no peer support. I was at Sloan Kettering in 1997. This was not supposed to happen. They had support systems back then. They weren't as good as they are today. But no one had taken into consideration the fact that I was a human being. I was 22. I was a pianist. I was impotent. I was bald. I had lost 110 pounds. I felt socially ridiculous. And I couldn't look at myself in the mirror and understand who I was as a human being. Everything had changed. There was no cradle. There was no cocoon. There was no path. There was no what's next, no new normal. All these terms we like to throw around today, which mean something today, didn't exist back then. So I struggled to date. I struggled to get a job. I struggled to make sense of what the hell I wanted to do with my life. I struggled to see if I could ever play again. So then I wound up writing music, because I'm a composer. I wound up writing music in my head that I could not play. And I took a job. I resented the job. It was a good job, but I resented it because I didn't want this job. I wanted to do this, and my life was going in this direction now. That job turned out to be a boost because I managed to build up a very creative career into graphic design, marketing strategies, branding, advertising. I worked in Madison Avenue for 7 years, actually built my career up. Introduced me to a whole new world that led me to where I am today, so I believe everything happens for a reason of sorts. But in 1998, I was able to rehabilitate my left hand enough where I could record music in a way that I felt as an artist I would enjoy having the world know what it is. I had no commercial aspirations. I had a job. I was making a living. But I recorded an album called Scribblings. And it was called Scribblings because I scribbled my music and my ideas down with my other hand, my right hand. If you've ever written with your other hand, it looks like hieroglyphics. So it literally was my hieroglyphics that I called my Scribblings. And the album called Scribblings was born in 1999. I recorded it in 98. And then on my 5-year cancer anniversary, I recorded a second album called Every Step of the Way, which was sort of my way of accepting closure. That I've lived 5 years, I'm not a statistic, and the rest of the system will go screw itself. And at that point, I had met the woman who ultimately would become my wife and the mother of my 2 beautiful children. And we began version 2.0 of my life in 2001. And it was at that point in time that I realized, especially after 9/11, because I had worked in the World Trade Center, a lot of people reevaluated where they were in their lives, what they wanted to do with them, what's your purpose. And did I really want to sort of sell Doritos to teenagers? As a Frito-Lay was a client of mine when I worked at the ad agency. I was happy with my girlfriend at the time. I was making a decent living, and I just felt I could probably do something more. But that's when my album became this unexpected, hit. Not really on the charts or anything, but a lot of cancer patients got a hold of it. I don't know how. I only made 1,000 of them for myself and my friends and my family. But a lot of the drug reps managed to get copies of them for the nurses or whatever, and they came to the doctor's office because they gave them out to the patients at Sloan. And one of the drug companies came to me and said, "We want you to come speak at our patient conference." And this was in 2002. I think it was Huff and LaRoche back then. So, and they, whatever it was, and it was the first time I got on stage with a piano that wasn't like an audience that I was performing for, like in college or like a regular musical audience, like Lincoln Center or whatever. It was a bunch of sales reps, but they're human beings. I was scared out of my mind. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no advocacy platform. I just got up there and told my story. And I watched that video today, and it's like the humble beginnings of aspiration. Because I realized at that point that there was something more I could do that was tangible. It wasn't like a what could I do? It's like I have the opportunity to give a voice to the next me. And I like to use the euphemism that no one should ever get robot tested for brain cancer. So I use that all the time. No robot tested for brain cancer is the euphemism for being an advocate. You want to make sure the next you doesn't go through the same crap that you went through. So it took me 4 years. And in that time I met Stan. I met Dennis Roth. I worked with the National Brain Tumor, the Brain Tumor Society, the American Brain Tumor Association, and the National Brain Tumor Foundation, which are now 2 groups. And I got involved with them. I spoke to patients. My album, wasn't like, I didn't make any money on it, but my album became this thing I could use as a tool to prove that it's possible to survive. You can own what happens to you, and that life is about being creative. Like the art of survivorship is a term that I coined years ago, and the art of survivorship is how you choose to live. And the mantra that I had in my head, which I remember like printing out, I had like the very first like inkjet printer ever, because I'm a geek. In like 1991, I bought an inkjet printer. And I remember I came up with this mantra that I used on the printer like 5 years later. It says, everything that happens to you, whether you like it or not, becomes a part of your life, and you must live your life and be the best you can be every step of the way. I'll say that again because I speak very fast. That everything that happens to you, whether you like it or not, becomes a part of your life, and you must live your life and be the best you can be every step of the way. And I literally printed that out. I wallpapered my bedroom with it, like nonstop, different fonts, different colors. I was a color inkjet too, super geek. Yeah, literally, my was wallpapered with that. And that was sort of what brought me into the forefront of what cancer advocacy means. And what it really meant to me was the Robitussin scenario. I had an opportunity, to get that next 21-year-old who was alone and isolated. I didn't care what kind of cancer that kid had or what kind of tumor that kid had. I wanted to make sure that that kid had the chance to meet someone else just like them, had the chance to have some dignity in what they were going through, had the chance to appreciate and make sense of the madness. They had some sort of anchor that they could latch themselves onto, some sort of organization, some brand that wasn't Komen, that wasn't Livestrong, it wasn't American Cancer Society. It had to be something new. And I'm an advertising guy, I think in brands. So it just dawned on me that there needed to be a brand, a new organization in the cancer world that only represented the youth culture, that only spoke to the 20 and 30-something that have no friends in the cancer world, that have no cancer buddies, that have no peer support, that are isolated, alone, and they think they're the only ones going through this. And again, it's irrelevant to what kind of cancer you have because the issues are still the same. Fertility, dating, insurance, careers, intimacy, self-identity, post-traumatic stress syndrome. All these things are irrelevant to what kind of cancer or tumor you have. The fact that it happens to you puts you in this situation. And I like to say that it kind of sucks to be 21 to begin with. It's hard enough. Throw cancer in the mix and boom, you got a really recipe for disaster. The isolation is the biggest issue. So I started the I'm Too Young for This Cancer Foundation. It's sort of this tongue-in-cheek. No one's really too young for cancer, but you kind of had to sort of poke a stick at it a little bit and get people's attention. And it started off very humbly. It was basically just a website that listed resources just for young adults. A lot of websites out there list great resources, but they're for everybody. I wanted to be sort of obnoxiously exclusive and alienate people who didn't belong there. Not to make them feel like they don't belong there, but because to make people feel like who did belong, they're very special. And the website started off as a list of blogs, back when blogs were first coming into their forefront in 2006, 2007. About 100 blogs of young adult survivors who did not know there was a network of blogs out there for young adult survivors. Films, books by young adult survivors, sculptures, paints, musicians who are young adult survivors like myself who wrote music when told they'd be dead. Organizations that do only young adult programs, whether it's career advice or fertility consulting or oocyte preservation or retreats and excursions or camps just for young adults. There's a great organization called First Descents. Everyone must go to First Descents. It's a mandate of mine that if you're a young adult with cancer, you go to First Descents. It is the nation's premier outdoor retreat, excursion, adventure, young adult experience nonprofit. It's like therapy. It's like you get a prescription to go to First Descents. That's the no Robitussin for brain cancer thing in my head. So by aggregating all of this content, all of this information into one website that no one's ever done before, I stumbled upon an accidental hit. And it became a huge success in a very short period of time, not financially, but awareness-wise. And we were ranked a Time Magazine Best 50 website for 2007 after being around for 7 months. We were number 17. We beat Yelp and LinkedIn, if that puts things in perspective. And it was just me in my basement with no money, thinking he could, change the world. And here we are, 5 years. We're just celebrating our 5-year anniversary today. This month actually, because we launched in December-ish, but the official launch was January of 2007. And we are now the largest support community for young adults in the country. We have 40 chapters, all volunteer-led. We host over 100 social events every single year. We have pioneered a new content delivery program called the Stupid Cancer Show, which is an online webcast, a live online webcast that podcasts to iTunes. 200 broadcasts, 1.6 million listeners around the world, and it's just won an award for most innovative use of social media in the world for nonprofits, which is incredibly humble, and we're incredibly gracious for the people that voted for us. We got over 100,000 votes worldwide. That got us to where I don't know who these people are, but they voted for us, which means you're doing something when you don't know who the people are. And I think the coup de grace of the organization is that we really had carte blanche to design an ecosystem that did not exist. What did young adults want that was not out there? What did they need that was not out there? What was it that they wished they would have had if they had it back then, like myself? What would have been nice if I had? And it is immediate peer support. It is immediate social connectivity. It is having nurses and social workers and physicians know to treat you differently. This is how you speak to these people. This is how you address these issues. This is not clinical. This is not medical. This is not biological. This is in no way anything to do with anything on that side of the aisle. This is all about your life, what you're entitled to as a young adult affected by cancer, and how you can choose to live your life effectively and efficiently with the resources you didn't know existed. And that's the entire promise of our brand, is to empower you to be able to live and to channel your anger into positive good. So I'll go back, because the coup de grace, I believe, is someone had basically said to me, Matt, we have a small grant. We'd like to do something. Okay, let's throw a giant conference. It's like, no, I said a small grant. So I said, all right, let's throw a small conference. Well, what should the conference be? I said, well, let's do a conference just for young adults. And we'll make it like open bar. And we'll have go-go dancers. And we'll have crazy costumes. And we'll just throw like a Burning Man for this. But we're the Leukemia Lymphoma Society. We don't do that. I said, well, you're going to do it now. And they did. Didn't have the go-go dancers. That's actually next spring, and I'll tell you about that. Believe me, there'd be go-go dancers. The OMG Cancer Summit was born in April of 2008, and it has since evolved into this nationally award-winning experience of a lifetime for over 500 young adults each year. And it features the nation's leading experts in everything not clinical, in legal, in career advice, in sexuality, in relationships and dating, in peer support, in psychosocial education, in just gross empowerment that you could ever put in the same place at the same time. And I want to play you a video of this year's event, which was in New York. Next year we're moving it to Vegas, because why not? So I want to play you the video of what this culture has become, how the young adult cause became a movement that had legs and now has wings, and that we are all part of something so much bigger than ourselves now, because this guy who was told he never live did something by accident that worked. And there is now a national conversation about why we matter as a patient population, how we're different, and how we are engaging in our health, regardless of how long we live. So I'm going to play this quick video here to show you pretty much what we're all about. Let's see if this comes back up.
We're at the fantastic 4th annual OMG Summit here in New York City. We want to talk about energy at this place. Nobody rocks the house like young adult survivors.
It's OMG! Basically, any young adult affected by cancer in any way, maybe a caregiver, a child, a survivor themselves.
The OMG Summit is the #1 place to get together with the young adult cancer world. There are more experts here, there are more survivors here. Great.
This is by far the hippest crowd I've addressed.
It's a state of the cancer survivor. Keep it real. It's laid back. It's comfortable. It's a chill vibe.
So right now, there's lots of breakout sessions that are happening at the OMG Summit. We've got one on families, we have one on survivorship, we'll have one tomorrow on writing, all sorts of different themes. So whatever niche you're interested in, whatever issue you're concerned about, whatever need is being unmet in your life, you can come here and you can hear experts in that area speak to that and change your life.
They have the singles group talking downstairs. The #1 thing they say when we sit down at the table says, let's talk about sex. Let's talk about these things and use our humor, use our bluntness, use our honesty, but also try to come up with a game plan to keep people healthy, to maximize their health, to optimize their health.
The important topics when we break out, those are taken seriously, of course, but the vibe of the event is just to celebrate ourselves and everybody else.
I am a 10-year cervical cancer survivor.
They're a little quiet. They don't know how to really compete. It's not depressing. It's not talking about woe is me. These guys are celebrating themselves and celebrating their relationships with one another because of the energy that's been created and has been fostered.
I was 21 when I was diagnosed with brain cancer. There was no one out there that was offering this level of community or aggregation or sort of this umbrella of support resources to the next me.
It's a club nobody wants to be part of, but if you can find other people in the club, now you know you're not the only one. And just being able to share your experiences, whether good or bad, with someone else that can empathize with you is a big thing.
Once you know someone else is a survivor, there's so many things you can just both relate to and understand about each other that you kind of immediately just connect on that level without needing anything else in common.
It's just a mutual understanding of how much it sucks, but how much you can get over it and how much you can triumph because of it.
The opportunity to offer someone else is to start to share your stories.
There's a lot of folks that are here that are very smart and that have tons of information, that have MD, PhD, MSW along with their name. But there's a lot of people that have a ton of information that have the word survivor after their name.
And what I have to say to cancer is that now you've given me a gift to now dedicate my life to helping others going through this disease. So as much as I hate you, I love you for putting me on purpose.
Because cancer left the hot mess and we're going to help things up.
Family, community, it's love, it's power, it's hip, it's cool, it's funny, it's irreverent, it's so many amazing, beautiful, and wonderful things.
It finally gave me someone like me, someone who understood what I was going through, who understood my concerns, and understood my pains, my fears, and my worries. And I'll forever be grateful to that.
That's it. You guys are amazing.
I'm blown away by what has happened in the last 4 years. I stand today a god, just befuddled at how this has exploded into what it has. And it's just been an amazing ride. Can't wait to see where the next 10 years go. You know what it is, stupid cancer, stupid cancer, stupid cancer, stupid cancer. You know what it is, stupid cancer, stupid cancer, stupid cancer, stupid cancer all day. You know what it is, stupid cancer, stupid cancer, stupid cancer, stupid cancer.
No, we don't mess around. I mean, it's in my heart is a brand because I really want it to be more than just a cause. And what has tangibly happened in the last 5 years, I challenge any nonprofit in this country to stand up to how we feel we've impacted society with this movement, and I'll give you 5 examples. One, the Leukemia Lymphoma Society, a very disease-specific organization, supports the OMG Summit. They now have, thanks to working with us, a disease-agnostic weekly online webcast for young adults with cancer that we have helped co-moderate and co-develop with them. So I'll say that again. The Leukemia Lymphoma Society is no longer the Leukemia Lymphoma Society for Young Adults. We help anyone with young adults through this young adult program because we believe in the cause. So the influence of the young adult movement has changed the mission statement of a 70-year-old institution. That is huge, meaningful progress. There are organizations like the Lymphoma Research Foundation, even the Children's Brain Tumor Foundation, Caring Bridge, and the FICA group, who have all adopted young adult programs now that are disease agnostic, regardless of where they are in their verticals. This is huge progress, that they are all adapting and adopting to the social change that is intentionally purposeful. There is now an active society of adolescent and young oncology with an accompanying journal of adolescent and young oncology. This is transforming the medical landscape, that there is a journal and a society just for a brand new subspecialty of oncology to come to bear, where you're getting a lot of pediatric oncologists learning how to step up and in sync with the long-term survivorship care of pediatrics. They're now understanding that if you're treating a 26-year-old who had brain cancer at 8, it's the same psychology as treating a 28-year-old with colon cancer. It's understanding their age. So that's a huge deal. The fact that we won most innovative use of social media in the world with our radio show is groundbreaking. And again, I've always been a cynic because I'm Jewish and from New York, and I have to be. It's in my blood. And as much as I love the significance of other international causes, I've never believed it was possible for cancer to ever beat Africa, or orphans, or beating up pets, or water, or hunger, or poverty. Cancer never wins on those things because there's global epidemics. We beat out 2,000 of those charities for the social media award with 100,000 votes. That is life-altering gravity change in the perception of what's important to our culture. And the fifth thing is the fact that we actually have this annual conference now, which people are flocking to. They can't wait to go to Vegas and be with 500 of their peers, or to watch it on the live stream and live tweet it with 10,000 other people. It has really become something that I'm just so humbled and proud of. And as much as I can get up on a CNN and say X and 10 million people will hear what I'm going to say, it happens here in this room. I do this all the time. We have legions of volunteers and ambassadors that speak at conferences and exhibit all over the country because they believe in the power of the young adult movement, that we are not in any way being disrespectful or slighting the efforts that have paved the way for there to be a young adult movement. But we are very gracious and very thankful that the pediatric world has seen such improvements in survival, that there is this cocoon, there are high clinical trial enrollments, and that the older adult population has amazing strides in the top 4 cancers: lung, prostate, colorectal, and breast. And there's still much strides to go in that age population. But in the young adult population, there has been no progress. In 30 years, mortality, morbidity have leveled. There have been no improvements in that, and that's not okay. Now, why? We can talk about why have there been no improvements, and it's because of, I'm a good example of that, late detection. People don't take you seriously. We also don't get lung, colorectal, prostate, and breast as young adults. We do in very small numbers. The cancers we get are blood cancers, brain cancers, and sarcomas, blood cancers, brain cancers, melanoma, and thyroid cancer. Those don't have real detection. You're not going to stick your head in an MRI at Walmart, just to see if you got something in your head. It doesn't happen that way. We don't get scans. We're not eligible for mammograms. We can do self-exam, but only to the point that the doctor takes us seriously and doesn't give us Robitussin. So there are huge social barriers to improving quality of life in young adults based on the actual diagnosis point. But that's not our fight. Our fight is to make sure that young adults are aware of the movement for them, that they have the power and the right to live their lives as earnestly and meaningfully and purposefully as possible through this national movement that's been engendered. So the takeaway here is really, what can I do? What can I do is understand that you're not alone, which is a very, just a throwaway cliche mnemonic. But the truth is you are not alone. And that there was a national epidemic of excitement and passion and vigor that this entire generation, I'm 37, I'll be alumni of my own organization in 3 years. But it is exactly what I wish I had 15 and a half years ago. And it is emblematic of need. Very rarely do you ever see something come to bear by accident. This came to bear by accident. It was not intentional. But it hit a point, it struck a chord, and it resonated with hundreds of thousands of people that didn't know it was possible for an entire age group to be segmented out, not by what disease you have, but by how old you are and how much it sucks to go through this. Because when your friends leave you and you lose a breast, or you can't have kids, or you're impotent for 3 years, or your hair never grows back, or you lose your job, whatever it is, there is someone exactly like you in this country that you can be matched up with today to let you know exactly that you're not alone. And here are 10 things you can do tomorrow to change that for the next you, because we know that you wish you had this when you were diagnosed 5, 10, 20 years ago. So that's sort of my presentation. I don't know, I know we're running late, but I don't know when you wanted to stop.
You have a question? Take some questions.
Yeah.
Beth Rosenthal, and this is where I'm going to cry. I think what you started is extraordinary, really is. I was diagnosed when I was 11, so I wasn't really sure if I should go to the other group or this group, but it was suggested that I come to this one because everything that you're talking about, I can so relate to. And I was diagnosed in '86. You know, there was nothing. The only person who was there for me was really my mom. And even today, I'm 38. You know, I'm still learning things about myself, and it's really only hitting me now that my parents never knew if I would be alive today. And I had, excuse me, I have so many side effects from this. And excuse me, I didn't expect to get so upset. But I have so many side effects, so I feel like, I don't know, you know, I'm sure cancer survivors have side effects. My tumor was benign, so I feel like it was like a double whammy for me. You know, first of all, you know, there was nobody as far as, you know, helping me as a child. You know, just understanding what was going on with me. I mean, when you're 11, you know, you don't know what's supposed to, you know, I don't know. You know, you just listen to your parents at that age, and it really has only hit me within the last maybe 6 years too, about that there's really no support for benign brain tumors as well. So, but what you started was extraordinary, and I actually started, you know, a nonprofit helping benign brain tumor survivors, because I did actually connect with Alan Swan. I don't know if he still works for you.
Oh, he used to work for us, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, I know he said like benign brain tumor survivors, you know, fit into that under the umbrella, but you know, people don't understand. You know, even though it's nice and easy to fit under that umbrella, but at the same time, you want awareness for what you've gone through. You know, like I know other survivors, you know, when you say, oh, I had a benign brain tumor, and they say, oh, it's benign, and they're so close-minded that they don't even think what's the next step for you. You know, if it, you know, there's like no compassion. And so I don't know where I'm going with this, but
But my response to that is that you are in every right to feel this way, and I want to be able to offer your anger a place in this world that channels positivity, that where you can now know that there's an amazing organization in San Diego called Mass Kickers. My friend Eric Anthony Galvez, great guy. He was an LCSW marathon. I'm sorry, he was a DPT, he's a doctor of physical therapy, triathlete marathon runner, got diagnosed with a brain tumor, and he's now sort of a paraplegic in a chair. But he just has a brand new book out that he just launched on Amazon. He's one of those inspiring guys.
He also went to First Descent.
Yes, and he's an FDer. So, and he's been my BFF for like 5 years now. So I love him. Eric Anthony Galvez.
Yeah.
Just Google.
To just mention that First Descent is open to people with all kinds of brain
First Descent is disease agnostic. They don't care what you had as long as it's invasively disruptive to your life. You know, if it's chemotherapy or radiation, you still get chemo radiation for benign brain tumors. There's still surgery. It's still invasive, and it's oncology themed. I think the purpose of all this is really to, I'll give you a stat, and I hate stats, but I'll give you a stat. There are 1.4 million Americans in this country who are between the ages of 21 and 40 who are cancer survivors and brain tumor survivors. 1/3 of them, 350,000, had cancer under the age of 18 and are now in their 20s and 30s. That's a huge patient population. It's good because it's progress, that the little kids aren't dying anymore, but they're growing up with consequences of cure. And the consequences of cure are irrelevant to when you were diagnosed. I was diagnosed at 21. Do not look under my hood. I swear to God, it's a mess under there. My dad's greatest words to me are, clean up nice, make it look good, and never look under the hood. You know, but for purposes of being in here, I had a stroke on January 31st this year. You know this, you saw on Facebook. I had a stroke. There's nothing wrong with me cardiovascularly. I'm in tip-top shape. I could lose 30 pounds, but who couldn't? The nerves in the back of my head are fried after 15 years. It's called vasculopathy. And there's no preventing it. There's no knowing if I'll ever have another one, if I have one tomorrow, if I could be dead in 30 seconds from now. But I'm a nerd, so I'll quote J.R.R. Tolkien. We must make the most of the time that has been given to us. And it is appreciating that, knowing that I could be dead tomorrow. And even what Steve Jobs would say, like knowing that you're going to die, you know, is the best motivation to live your best life. You don't know when it's going to happen. And even if you're not sick, if you realize you can get hit by a bus, this is what you do to make your life worth living. I have 2 little children. I don't want to die. You know, I want to live, but I want to live meaningfully and purposefully.
Well, I was hoping, because I started a nonprofit called It's Just Benign for benign.
I remember, yeah.
Yeah, I was hoping, maybe not today, but I'd give you a brochure and maybe you could offer me suggestions at some point.
Well, we'll definitely get you on the radio show.
Hmm?
We'll get you on the radio show.
Oh, okay. That would be great.
Yeah. Okay, any other last minute questions? Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.